I met Maria what seems like yesterday. The mall was packed on this busy Saturday afternoon. The air was filled with the scent of pine and cinnamon, and there were Christmas lights everywhere. I was running about looking for last-minute gifts for my family when I saw her. She worked behind the counter in a fashionable clothes store. Her shoulders were covered in long, dark hair that was curled. Her hazel eyes gleamed as she greeted people, and her kind smile drew me in. Before I knew it, I was inside the door, attempting to look interested in a terrible holiday sweater in order to start a conversation with her. "May I assist you with locating something?" In a kind and in-tune manner, she questioned. I stammered over what I was saying, and was reminded of a bashful teenager. Okay, I'm searching for a present for my sister." Her laughter made my heart skip a beat. "Oh, unless your sister is really humorous. I don't believe the sweater is the greatest option." After we spoke for a time, I learned her name was Maria. When I left the store, I had her number, and we were going on a date the following week. On our first date, we headed to a fast food restaurant. It was the only item I could afford at the time, so it wasn't really romantic. For hours, we sat at a greasy table eating hamburgers and fries while chatting. We discovered we attended the same elementary school but had never crossed paths. Her eyes glistened as she said, "Perhaps it's fate." I can still remember my foolish smile as I said, "Small world." After that, we were inseparable. We got along well. Fantastic from the start, as we shared a love of comedic content and had an immediate connection that seemed almost too good to be true. A year later, I proposed to her on one knee with a ring I had been holding on to for several months. Our first couple years of marriage were fantastic. We decided against having children, as a result of our desire to focus on our business and spend more time together. Maria would be so delighted for me that she would say, "Johnson, I'm so proud of you," while grinning. Everything was good until it wasn't. When Maria lost her job, it all started. Something had happened at work. Even though she never gave me the entire story, I knew it caused her to question herself. I initially made an effort to assist her by advising her to take a break and regroup. "Han, don't worry about it." I tried to be patient and understand that she was going through a difficult period, but as time went on, my frustration grew. "Have you thought about looking for a new job?" I'd ask gently, only to be met with a defensive glare. "Why? So I can be humiliated again?" She'd respond, her voice bitter. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Maria appeared to lose all motivation. She'd spend her days lying on the couch, binge-watching TV shows, or scrolling endlessly through her phone. Our once clean home began to appear neglected, with dishes piling up in the sink and laundry overflowing from the hamper. Our conversations, which used to be characterized by laughter and shared dreams, have instead become tense silences or small arguments. After a long day at work, I would return home hoping for some comfort or connection, only to find Maria fast asleep or absorbed in her phone, hardly noticing my presence. Physical intimacy, which had been so important in our relationship, began to wane, and when I tried to initiate, Maria would return, complaining about headaches or fatigue. I felt like a stranger in my home, disconnected from the woman I had fallen in love with. As the weeks went by, a persistent doubt began to grow in the back of my mind. Was there anything more going on? The Maria I knew, the vibrant, kind-hearted woman who had stolen my heart in that mall, seemed to have vanished, replaced by this distant, irritable stranger. I tried to ignore these thoughts, telling myself that it was just a phase, but feel like our once strong foundation was collapsing under me. One evening, after another quiet dinner broken only by the sound of Maria's fork scraping against her plate, I made the decision to try to get through to her again. "Maria," I said softly, "I'm worried about us. Can we talk about what's going on?" She looked up at me, her hazel eyes dull and guarded. For an instant, I thought I saw a glimpse of the old Maria, a hint of vulnerability, perhaps even regret, but her expression hardened and she pushed away from the table. "There's nothing to talk about," she muttered, taking her phone and withdrawing to her bedroom. I sat there by myself and glanced at the food that was there, and I couldn't shake the idea that something significant had changed in our relationship. Remained. It seems that the woman I had centered my life around and intended to spend my senior years with was moving on. I had no idea how to win her back. Maria was hurting from the beginning. One evening at dinner, I saw that she was unable to stay still and was constantly moving. She pushed me away and said the meal wasn't good when I asked if she was okay. After a week, I discovered her sobbing on the bathroom floor. "What's wrong, Maria?" I knelt beside her and wrapped my arm around hers. With a moan, she looked away. "Honestly, it's not that comfortable. There's a problem down below." I drove her home after helping her get up because I was afraid. I tapped the cushion of my chair and looked at her, but she didn't seem to be responding to me because it felt like the doctor was taking forever to call. At last, Dr. Allen called us in. He examined us and then looked at us seriously, saying, "Maria, you have signs of rectal prolapse. This is something we should be aware about." "Prolapse of the rectal wall?" I had not considered that idea at all. However, why? How did this come about? Maria spoke very slowly. Dr. Allen gave her an explanation, prescribed medication, and advised her to avoid gardening for a while. There was a terrible odor to the words. Having fun in the backyard? Maria's cheeks became a frightening shade of red when I stared at her. The quiet between us on the drive home felt like an unspoken charge. Once we were at home, we became very formal in our conversation. You heard what the doctor said, Maria. Don't participate in the backyard activities. I was ignorant. It's something that I was unaware of. She fiddled with a stray thread on the couch. It was done by someone else. We don't do this. I had the concept out of the blue. And when I expressed it, my thoughts accelerated. Was this something from her recent history, or something else entirely? That evening I bent over my laptop and read a ton of accounts regarding rectal prolapse. The blue light caused eye strain, studying statistics and spooky tales. The more I read, the more evident guilt was depicted. Maria quickly realized how aloof she had been acting during the last few months. Her weird absences, her distant expressions, and her mention of Scott, the boy she dated in high school. My jaw tensed. Was the former boyfriend the subject of this? I talked to her about it the following day. Maria, please be honest with me. Is Scott to blame for it? She looked at me with big eyes. How come? It does not operate that way. Maria, you have my doubts. The doctor's advice and the symptoms don't add up. Tell the truth to me. Even though her voice was trembling, she continued, I tried it once, in high school with Scott. It was just once. I swear her defensiveness infuriated me even more. What's happening now cannot be explained by attending high school. I mentioned that something is off. She turned away as I roared and rushed out of the room. That day I was unable to focus, so I looked up motion detector cameras in between courses. I'd find out the truth on my own if she refused to tell it to me. The cams were surprisingly simple to put up. I was feeling very suspicious, so I hid them in secret spots throughout the home. After a few days, nothing happened, and I began to question whether her account was accurate and I was mistaken. My phone buzzed until Thursday afternoon when it detected movement. I was attending a chemistry class at the time. Upon viewing the video, my stomach fell. Maria was having an affair. My memory of the moment I let the class go is rather vague. My hands were shaking from anger as I drove home. I traveled to a darker place in my head with each thought. I could see crimson when I arrived to our front door. As I crashed through the front door, my heart was thumping like a bass drum. Stress was practically palpable in the air. Through the living room window, I witnessed the man kissing Maria. Everything I'd assumed was confirmed by the way her lips met his. Maria's boyfriend Scott appeared like a deer caught in headlights as he remained motionless, with barely half of his shirt buttoned. Maria's eyes widened in terror. Maria, what on earth are you talking about? I yelled, my words resonating off the walls. I was both sad and furious at the same moment. Johnson, it's not what you think, she stated, raising her hands. She pulled a towel about herself, trembling. We are able to resolve this. Scanning the room swiftly, Scott tried to figure out how to get away. Hey, it's not, stop talking. I raised my voice, and he recoiled at the power of my remarks. With trembling hands, I took my phone out of my pocket and declared, I have footage of everything. I then hit play on the clip and presented it to them. Their faces went pale as they realized they were being discovered. There was no turning around in this. Maria has a fractured front. Johnson, please don't touch it, I cracked up. What is the duration of this situation? Scott glanced at Maria after glancing at me. Hey, a long time has passed. I apologize, it all started when she lost her job. All right, Maria's shoulders drooped, and the person I knew seemed to has passed away. Replaced by this guilt-ridden, desperate shell. Scott continued, but he was unable to look at me. We were being negligent, and we had been doing this for months. When she encountered that issue, it wasn't one from the past. It is current as of right now. His voice sliced like a razor into my chest. I had a tremendous need for vengeance after being misled. You two are such a pain in the neck. I spit out. I spoke in a low, angry voice. Go, presently. With tears streaming down her cheeks, Maria stood as Scott hurriedly gathered his belongings. Come on, Johnson, she begged, her voice breaking. She didn't have the courage to say anything more, so she glanced down. Scott moved. Walking carefully to the door and out of the house without looking back. Maria walked slowly behind them, as though she were bearing the burden of her own shame. Once they had both left, the home became silent. Standing in the now empty living room, being lied to felt like a heavy blanket. I tried to relax by taking a long breath, but all I could think about was getting even. That evening, once Scott and Maria had departed, I found myself sitting alone in our dimly lighted living room. The murmur of distant traffic was all that could be heard. Anger, deceit, and a desire for vengeance tainted my thinking. I mixed myself a drink. I felt like I was on fire and the golden liquid scorched my throat. It was not the only thing happening. It was intended to demolish all that I had created. It was crucial that I immediately establish a plan. When I phoned in sick the following morning, I did so with a clear brain and a strong purpose to end their lives the way they had ended mine. I went down at my desk and began jotting down every idea I could think of. My first objective was to text Scott and ask to meet up. To my astonishment, he immediately consented. Our meeting place was a dilapidated cafe off of the main drag. His eyes flickered frantically as he saw me enter. He appeared exhausted. "Jones, what do you want?" He slouched and whispered, "You look like crap. Scott, this is the agreement. You're going to stop working and make alimony payments today. If you don't, I'll make sure that everyone see the video." Scott's eyes widened. I leaned in and said, "Watch me." My voice was aloof and remote. He responded, "You can't ruin my life like that. This is not possible." Scott's shoulders sank into his feet, telling me he got it. I finished my coffee, relishing the flavor of impending achievement. Although Scott was the love of Maria's high school years, to me he was just another issue to be resolved. The next thing to do was to discuss it with Maria. I slept somewhere else to get my mind clean before returning the following day, to keep her occupied in our kitchen, which nevertheless brought back memories. Scott consented to give the ex-wife money. "I told you up front that you would be signing the divorce decree." Maria's eyes were full of tears when she gazed at me. "Johnson, please don't do this." I swiped my finger across the video on my phone. "It's time to sign the documents now." She followed instructions. Her hands, though, were trembling. There was an ominous feeling in the air. Betrayed confidence and vowed to murder everyone present. In order to avoid having time to reflect on the memories, I hurriedly packed my belongings and submitted the video that evening. In a matter of hours, it went viral online and completely destroyed Maria's reputation. The opinions were unyielding and cruel. Her family stopped speaking to her, and her phone continued to ring with nasty and repulsive texts, cutting connections as soon as feasible. I recently moved into a new apartment with a view of the park across town. It was a significant departure from the gloomy and dreary life I had before. Every morning when I took a deep breath of fresh air, I felt the bonds of my past slip away. When Maria called, nobody picked up. Her cries went unanswered, and she was forced to endure daily public humiliation, fingers pointing and comments uttered behind her back. Out of morbid curiosity, I once found myself in front of the old apartment building. After being teased in public and not getting enough sleep, Maria went out with a pale and worn-out countenance. There was nothing in her eyes, no spark. But Scott was no longer there. I'd heard he was having trouble finding a permanent job because of the scandal. His social media profiles had vanished without a trace, and every blank page served as evidence of his downfall. I wanted them to hurt, and they did, so I felt a strange mixture of delight and emptiness inside. I returned to reading, exercising, and even playing chess after moving into my new home. I organized activities for my children. They smiled and conversed, the new song drowning away the memory of earlier dishonesty. Bit by bit, I started to reclaim the bits of myself that had been lost in the pandemonium. I was reading a paper for an upcoming class one evening on a complex chemical reaction. I paused and looked around my flat, which was filled with little details that reminded me of my past, such as the modern workout equipment in the corner and the framed chess problems hanging on the wall. I had overcome my fear of the past. It was merely a soiled page that I had picked up and placed down from a book. Maria and Scott were no longer important to me. They were the remnants of a life ended by deception. Looking ahead, I saw that, in spite of the wounds they had caused, it was not just about getting even, it was also about rediscovering who I was. It was mine, even though it wasn't easy or flawless. I was looking out my new apartment's window at the bustling metropolis below when It seemed as though the tension of the previous few months had finally subsided. I was starting to feel like myself again after experiencing a wide range of emotions and behaviors. I knew what to expect when I opened the second message from Maria that beeped out of my phone. "Johnson, I need you to listen. I am prepared for everything. Give this a break." I sighed with despair and rage. I wanted to dismiss her, to close the message and forget about her, but I felt I needed to respond once more to be clear. "That's what I've decided, Maria. Observe the consequences of your actions. That will be beneficial. I can't walk away from this. You may apologize, but the pain you inflicted upon me and the trust you betrayed will never go away." I hit the send button and dropped my phone onto the sofa. It buzzed very immediately again, but since I knew what it would say, I ignored it. "Give me more anguish and promises, please." Instead, I made a glass of water for myself in my tiny kitchen. Drinking, I considered how Maria's life had come to an end when I had ejected her from our home. Finding a place to stay was difficult for her, and her family had abandoned her because of what she had done. The film I promised to distribute put a cloud over her, making it almost hard for her to get employment in our area, even though I never did. I wondered whether I had gone too far, and felt a little awful about what I had done. However, I couldn't help but notice the expression on her face when I saw her with Scott. During the months of lying and dishonesty. No, I made the decision she didn't. Now she had to cope with the outcome. Scott, though, was not doing much better. After I forced him to resign his job, he struggled to find permanent employment, and the alimony payments I demanded were severely impairing his finances. When I last heard, he was forced to return to his little village and live with his parents. My phone started buzzing again, but it was more intense this time. As I took it in, I moaned. It was Maria, but even though I knew it wasn't a smart idea, I played the message she had left. She was crying so hard her voice broke. Johnson, please. I am aware of my mistakes. I'm sorry I offended you, but I really need your aid. I'll pay you anything if you let this go. I am unable to. This is not how I want to live. Please, I beg of you. I gritted my teeth and erased the message. Did she believe the money will solve her problems or absolve her of responsibility? I put my finger on the end call button and gave her a call back. She answered it the first time it rang. Johnson? God be praised. I gave her the order to stop. Maria, listen up. Money is not the issue. The goal is no longer to exact revenge. It's about accepting responsibility for your actions. It was your decision what to do. You betrayed me, disappointed me, and threw away all of our collaborative efforts. For what reason is that the case? A fling with your high school boyfriend. I could hear her sobbing on the other end of the call. My desire was to reassure her that all would be well. Still, I fought that temptation. That was not my job anymore. I will not give up on this, Maria. You have to cope with the suffering you caused, just like I do. The only thing that's changed is that I believe it's time for you to move on as well. Before they could respond, I hung up. My hand started to shake a little when I put down the phone. It was finished, in fact. I returned to the window and studied the city once more. The houses were covered in a warm glow as the sun descended. It felt like a metaphor in that chapter of my life, like seeing the sun set. The next day I met with my lawyer to finalize the divorce documents. As I signed my name on the line, I experienced an odd mixture of emotions. Anger over what actually happened, sadness over what may have been, and mostly relief. It was finished. Upon exiting the attorney's office, I made the decision to take a stroll in the park. The leaves crunched beneath my feet and the air was cold. For the first time in months, I felt light and liberated. I thought about Maria, struggling in San Francisco, and Scott, living with his parents and broken by his mistakes. Although I didn't appreciate seeing them suffer, I didn't feel guilty about it either. Now that they had made their choices, they had to deal with the consequences. I was prepared to face my fate. A place where there are no betrayals or lies. Hope for a time when everything that had transpired would not burden me and I could be myself once more. I sat on a bench and watched people go by holding hands, friends laughing in groups, and families playing with their children. Life moves on, and I will too, I told myself. My phone trembled in my pocket. This time it was none of Maria Scott or anyone from my history. On a whim, I downloaded the dating app last week, and it was providing me with some insight. I was matched by someone. Grinning, I swiped to view their photo. Perhaps this was the beginning of something fresh and better. I felt a sense of peace wash over me as I got up to continue. I could look forward to what was ahead and move past the past. For the first time in a very long time, I was eager to see what it brought.